Okay, good evening, everybody. It is 6:05 p.m. on I'm sorry, I don't know the date.
13th.
June 13th. How could I forget? And welcome to Committee of the Whole. This is a very special day. This is Democracy Day. We do this every year at the same time every year. And we have Greg Coleridge here who's going to come up and tell us a little bit of the history of Democracy Day and also introduce the speakers that will be speaking tonight.
Mr. President, we do need to do a roll call.
Oh, forgot the roll call.
Maddox.
Here.
Posh.
Here.
Russell. Here. Kuda.
Here.
Cobb. Larson. Here. Petrus.
Here.
Cobb is excused. He has a board meeting at the same time. Mr. Coleridge, it's all yours.
Well, good evening. Happy Democracy Day to one and all. My name is Greg Coleridge. I'm the co-director of the National Move to Amend campaign, which is an outfit that began on the very day of the famous or infamous Supreme Court decision, Citizens United versus Federal Elections Commission in January of 2010. And on that day, Move to Amend was born and began a process of trying to amend the United States Constitution to, among other things, abolish two twin of sorts constitutional doctrines. The first is to overturn the notion that a corporation is a legal person. And the second is that money spent in political elections is equal to First Amendment protection, First Amendment protected free speech. And from that effort was born a campaign nationally to try to both change the law, a constitution, that is, but also, which goes together, a twin in of itself, is to change the culture. Because historically, as people know, whenever there has been significant social change in this country, you have to both change the law and change the culture. They do go hand in hand. And part of that cultural change was symbolically, but also to a certain extent, actually to get across the country communities to endorse, if you will, and how communities endorse this initiative by calling on Congress to amend the Constitution. That is, as you may know, one of the two ways to amend the Constitution, to get Congress to pass a constitutional amendment, is to garner support. And that support took the form of getting organizations of all sorts, from local to national, to call for this effort, but also to get political municipalities at both the city, the county, village, town, and others to pass resolutions, non-binding, but nevertheless symbolic, but nevertheless public, and or to garner and organize citizen-driven ballot initiatives. Both of those happened here in Cleveland Heights. First, the resolution, followed a year or two later in 2013, November, in fact, of 2013, by 77% of voters who went to the polls after people, many in this room and many others, who had hit the pavement and collected signatures to put this measure on the ballot, to pass that effort, calling on Congress to enact the We the People Amendment. But an interesting twist, in addition to that ballot initiative, was the additional provision to not just the city to call on Congress and send a notice saying the residents and the voters of Cleveland Heights passed this initiative, asking you, my congressperson, and other federal and state representatives to act in kind, but also to establish every year, in the case of Cleveland Heights, an annual what is called Democracy Day public hearing, an opportunity where citizens and residents and others could come together and specifically reflect on the impact of money in politics and corporate rule on their lives, their neighborhood, community, region, state, nation, planet. And so for this would be the 11th time we have come together here with the sponsorship, as the ordinance called for, that ordinance being Chapter 183 of the Cleveland Heights Codified Ordinance, and it is labeled political influence by corporate entities 2, as was called for by voters in that citizen initiative, to have a public hearing. And so this evening, there are a number of individuals who will both testify. I'll do so in a bit later. And yet at the same time, not just reflect on their personal stories, but there'll also be sort of a sharing of a few notable historical events in June that seem appropriate, that relate to corporate power, money in elections, democracy, and the power to define corporate entities by we, the people. So I will defer at the moment in sort of babbling at you with my testimony in the interest of time. And I know one of the testifiers here whose contributions will be rather unique and different from many of the others to lend their reflections on, again, the impact of corporate rule and the power of money in politics and corrupting the political process that prevents the voices of people without money to be authentically heard and their needs met. And hopefully at the end of all of this, you on council will have an opportunity to not just reflect on what we have said and reflected on, but yourself provide some comments on your experience in being, if you will, and trying at a local level and municipal level to authentically govern and authentically reflect the will and the interests of your constituents in the face of a corporate state and in the face where money increasingly defines what gets said, who gets to say, and how it is interpreted. Thank you.
Greg, are you testifying first?
Well, I can, but I thought maybe I'd wait.
I can come back to you. I can come back to you if you want. Ann Caruso. And also real quick, if anyone didn't sign up already and you filled out a sign-in sheet, hand them to me. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks for having a Democracy Day every year. I'm going to talk about fracking in Ohio's public lands. Actually, a week ago or so, I saw a video on the news showing Governor DeWine declaring 2024 as the year of Ohio State Parks. And this caught my attention because last year on January 7th, the governor signed HB 507, which is a law mandating fracking in Ohio's public lands, including our state parks. HB 507 began as a poultry bill, which covered food, cleanliness, utility use, and chicken production. The provision calling for fracking in our state lands was added at the last minute without any fanfare or much media coverage. Passage of it was actually unconstitutional because Ohio laws are limited to one subject matter, and also because this law was passed without the required 3 readings before it was voted on. Even so, it is now on the books. Now, 13 years ago, you might remember, there was a law passed, HB 133, that also allowed fracking in our state parks, but it was never enacted. Back then, there was large protests in Columbus against it. The hearings were overwhelmingly filled with people that opposed the bill. The testimony against it was overwhelming, and there was just, I think, 6, like really a handful of testimonies in favor of it. That bill called for appointing a commission to oversee fracking in our state parks, but that was never done. The commission was never appointed. No one wanted to enact such an unpopular law back then, until now. This current law, HB 57, is very similar. It calls for creating a 5-member commission to oversee applications for and execution of fracking in our state lands. And this time that commission was appointed, and they are now processing what they call nominations from the oil and gas industry of the state lands that they want to frack. The 5-person appointees to the commission all have ties to the oil and gas industry, even though one commissioner is supposed to represent protection of the environment. The law calls for well pads placed not less than 400 feet from state land boundaries, so the frack wells are actually not in the state lands. And Governor DeWine has assured the public that there will be no surface disruption of the state lands. Yet, the law does allow the industry to obtain permission from individual state agencies to do what they feel is necessary. So that reassurance is not ironclad. Fracking involves more than a well pad. Compressor stations, pipelines, flaring towers, tremendous noise, constant stream of truck traffic to bring in toxic fracking fluids and take away radioactive waste products are all part of fracking. In addition, each frack requires millions of gallons of water, which will be coming from our lakes and streams. You can go to the website called saveohioparks.org, which was constructed by a group of volunteers across the state. And that website lists the state lands which are now up for fracking and are still accepting public comment. But there have been many of our parks and wildlife refuges that have gone through this process and are now going to be fracked. The oil and gas industry is a major campaign contributor to Ohio State candidates, both Republican and Democrat, as well as having a daily lobbying presence in Columbus. I had many legislators tell them that daily they hear from oil and gas lobbyists. So these people are on first name basis and buddy-buddy, and you know how that goes. In recent years, that has paid off for the industry. The Ohio legislature has passed laws that favor the industry. One of the laws is HB 6, which we all know. Actually, this is the old HB 6 that ended our Ohio renewable energy and conservation standards. Another law was passed that allowed landowners that didn't want to sign leasing agreements to be forced into fracking if the surrounding area was also leased. Another law places major hurdles to anyone trying to build large-scale wind or solar energy projects. There's another very vague law that has a chilling effect on protests against oil and gas infrastructure. And now this new law, which actually labels fracking as green energy and allows it on our public lands, lands that are paid for by our taxes.
And I'm sorry, I failed to let everybody know that you had a 5-minute time limit. So
Okay, I got
Finish up.
but maybe 2 more sentences. Paid for by our taxes and set aside for the preservation and enjoyment of nature. It's really hard to, outline everything that's involved in this issue. So I just want to point out there's 2 very recent books that have come out, one by Cleveland writer, Randy Cunningham, which is about the Ohio environmental movement, called Where We Live. The other one is a book that's been compared to Silent Spring, which was a wake-up call in 1962. This book is Petroleum 238. These 2 books really cover this topic, and I encourage everybody to look into them. And Suzanne has them at MaxFacts. Great. Thank you.
Deborah Van Cleve.
while Deborah's coming up, the 5-minute time limit is up there on the screen there if you need to look up there every once in a while. I failed to let you guys know that. I see Deborah's brought her guitar, so I think we're in for a treat.
Okay, well, I figure in 5 minutes I can do about 1 1/3 songs, which will be enough to say what I was hoping to say this evening. This is The Money Crop, written by Malvina Reynolds in 1966. Well, money has its own way and money has to grow. It grows on human blood and bone, as any child would know. It's iron stuff and paper stuff with no life of its own. and so it takes its growing sap from human blood and bone. And many a child goes hungering because the wage is low. And men die on the battlefield to make the money grow. And those who take the money crop are avid without end. They plant it in the tenements to make it grow again. The little that they leave for us, it cannot be a seed. We spend it on the shoddy clothes and every daily need. We spend it in a minute, in an hour it is gone, to find its way to grow again on human blood and bone, blood and bone. Thank you. So, Lou and Peter Berryman are two amazing songwriters that live in Madison, Wisconsin, and this is the salient part of their song. Ooh, well, this guitar was in tune. Let's see. Do I get a little tiny bit of extra time for tuning?
We can freeze the time for the tuning part. I do know how taking a guitar from one temperature to another can just kind of wreak havoc.
Okay, here we go. Sorry. A mama fly, she laid 2 eggs and left them on the floor. An arbitrary breeze arose and blew them out the door. One landed in a parking lot, the other with a splat was blown into the Shangri-La of one decaying cat. Well, subsequently they were hatched as maggots Dick and Doug, and Dick upon the cat became a fat and healthy bug. Doug, he lay and languished on the asphalt where he fell. One day they met and Doug asked Dick, "How do you look so well?" And here's what Dick said. He said, "Hard work and perseverance, grim determination of the soul. I'd say from your appearance, you could use a little self-control." Now, we've all met maggots like Dick before, so we'll just sing that one more time just to reinforce his message. Hard work and perseverance, grim determination of the soul. I'd say from your appearance, you could use a little self-control.
Carla Rautenberg.
Carla Rautenberg, Berkshire Road, Cleveland Heights. What happens to a corporate person that repeatedly bribes government officials and even the government itself? For the biggest corruption scandal in Ohio history, have there been any consequences? For 8 individuals so far, yes. 2 have gone to prison on federal felony charges. 2 made deals with the feds. 2 died by suicide. And 2 former First Energy executives now face state felony charges. If additional state and federal charges are brought, more individuals could be indicted and face trial. Columbus is filthy with politicians who fed at the First Energy HB6 trough. But the criminal corporation itself, doing just fine and dandy, thank you very much. In a recent shareholder address, the president and CEO, Brian Turney, crowed, quote, as a result of the excellent work we've done to strengthen our balance sheet, we're in a strong position for the first time in the company's history to grow and invest in the opportunities across our businesses. Wait, how can this be? First Energy paid a $230 million fine to the federal government for bribing then Ohio House Speaker Larry Householder with $60 million and settled a separate shareholder suit for $180 million. But as Tabitha Woodruff of the National Lawyers Guild points out, quote, fines and settlements do little to deter corporate misconduct. What is the real difference between a fine and a bribe when First Energy can just pay the government and go back to generating profit off Ohioans? Even after some of the most egregious parts of House Bill 6 were repealed, others remain enshrined in law, costing Ohio electric ratepayers $500,000 every day through 2030, just to bail out 2 obsolete polluting coal plants. While First Energy does not benefit directly from these coal plant bailouts, American Electric Power, also a huge dark money contributor to Ohio electeds, rakes in most of that cash. But First Energy has never been in better shape. Fines just don't faze them. On May 29th, Ohio moved to amend the state chapters of the National Lawyers Guild, the Green Party and the Sierra Club, the Ohio Nuclear Free Network, the Poor People's Army, and Save Ohio Parks, all gathered in Columbus, and the First Energy Accountability Coalition was born. We held a press conference calling on Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost to unplug First Energy by revoking its charter. As Greg Coleridge of Move to Amend explains, corporate charters or licenses were originally meant to ensure that the state's corporate creations obeyed all laws, served the common good, and provided useful goods or services. Charters of corporations that failed to follow the provisions of their charters were often revoked. In the 19th century, everyone knew this. In the 21st, almost no one does. Greg points out that when we surgically cut a malignant tumor out of the body, it's not to punish the cancer, it's to allow the body to heal and return to health. When a corporation commits a crime, that threatens democracy. We revoke a corporate charter not so much to punish the corporation as to protect the body politic. After our press event, we marched across the street to deliver a letter from the coalition to the AG, who, surprise, did not deign to meet with us. However, we got excellent news coverage from the State House News Bureau, WOSU, WOUB, WVXU, IdeaStream, and the Columbus Free Press, among others. If you think we can't live without First Energy, don't worry. No one will be sitting in the dark. But unplugging First Energy will strike a healthy dose of fear into the remaining power utilities. If we succeed with charter revocation, companies will line up to take over First Energy's very profitable operations. But they will know that the people of Ohio mean business, honest, ethical business, not paid to play.
Marlene Goldheimer.
Mr. President, I'm going to step out at this time for family engagement, but I just want to say thank you to the public as well. Thank you.
So we have a nice cozy group this evening, and I have to tell you that it's very invigorating for me and comforting to be among members of the Cleveland Heights City Council and members of the community who actually believe that democracy is possible and are willing to advocate for this democracy. The focus for me right now is on Medicare Advantage plans. As an example of corporations are people and money is speech. Physicians for a national health program known as PNHP shined a light on the dangers of choosing a Medicare Advantage plan over choosing traditional Medicare. PNHP hosted a webinar entitled Taking Advantage: How Corporate Health Insurers Harm America's Seniors. My presentation outlines some of the webinar, but I accidentally hit the delete button and was not able to recall the details. I couldn't get them back. So in 10 minutes before this event, I put together something. And my suggestion to everybody here is to email me, and I will send you the YouTube of the actual recording of this webinar. I think you will find it very informative, and they will have all the facts to back up statements. My email address will be on the table, and I hope you'll, utilize it, and I'll send it right to you. It will cover false marketing to vulnerable seniors by advertising how much you will save by not having to pay a monthly premium. Also indicating they will provide dental and vision coverage, but will only pay a claim for in-network providers. You find that out later. Millions of dollars are being spent lobbying legislators to assure health insurers can continue making exorbitant profits by delaying and denying care. Medicare Advantage plans started out, believe it or not, as a federal government plan permitted to exist to save money and be more efficient. The plan costs taxpayers hundreds of billions of dollars more than if seniors were enrolled in traditional Medicare. Right now, half of all seniors in Medicare are in Medicare Advantage plans. The good news is that the public sector, and this is a kind of almost a quote from Senator Elizabeth Warren, is starting to see the damages from Medicare Advantage. And that includes hospitals, providers, nursing homes, and senior. And pressure is getting legislators to take notice, and Biden administration is investigating some of these marketing tactics. Without a doubt, after you listen to the webinar, it will confirm the need for passage of HR 54, the We the People Amendment. That brings me to the fact that Representative Shontel Brown did sign on as a co-sponsor of HJR 54. I thought it might be nice for her to know how much that is appreciated and that we thank her for taking a stand. So we have a very brief letter. It's like almost one sentence. And it'll be over there on the table. Please, you're welcome and invited to sign it. And the good news there is that we can support her with votes rather than a monetary sum of money. I think we have to be true to ourselves. Okay, not to worry. Yeah, it would be nice. Also, if Cleveland Heights City Council would draft a resolution thanking her for supporting this, because she came on late, and we really appreciate that she finally did it. Nobody knows exactly why, but I guess all efforts from all over helped, and I think she's probably tuned into the Progressive Caucus in, of the women, probably would influence her as well, which is fine. Either way, we're happy. And definitely take a look at this YouTube. I think you'll find it very enlightening. And be cautious, be cautious. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Dean Seek, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong.
Dean Seek, I live on Bolton Road. For many years, I have supported an organization called the Institute on Tax and Economic Policy, ITEP. It's the 501c3 associated with Citizens for Tax Justice. ITEP follows the implications of tax policy at both the federal and state levels. Incidentally, it's currently headed by Amy Hanauer, formerly of Policy Matters Ohio. Recently, ITEP released an analysis of the Trump tax cuts, otherwise known as the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, TCJA, of 2017. Specifically, ITEP's purpose was to study the effect of the TCJA 7 years after the measure was enacted. ITEP examined the tax-paying habits of 296 Fortune 500 and S&P 500 companies, which were profitable every year from 2013 to 2021. The study focuses on the record of taxes paid before and after the enactment of the Trump tax law in 2017 in 2 different 4-year periods, 2013 to 2016 and 2018 to 2021. These companies' profits represent more than 1/3 of the total nationwide $8.2 trillion in pre-tax corporate profits reported by the Commerce Department between 2018 and 2021. You may recall that the intent of the 2017 Trump tax bill was to cut corporate taxes, which it did from 35% to 21%. But corporations also paid less than the statutory tax rate due to capitalizing on numerous tax breaks and loopholes, which were not prohibited by the tax law despite promises to the contrary. The study shows that if corporations had paid the same 35% rate that was still in effect between 2013 and 2016, they would have paid another $666 billion in taxes. However, since they had the advantage of the Trump tax cut, they paid only $248 billion, a difference of 37%. By sectors of the economy, the electronics, IT, communications, and healthcare companies enjoyed the greatest tax cuts from the TCJA, ranging from a high of over 21% down to 15.5% for healthcare. Interestingly, 3 business sectors had 0 tax rates both before and after the tax cuts: auto manufacturing, oil and gas, and utilities. Some specific companies may be of interest. Verizon, whose rate dropped from 21% to 8%, was spared $11 billion in taxes by the Trump cuts when its tax debt dropped by 52% with profits of 18%. Walmart would have paid another $9 billion more if its effective rate hadn't dropped from 31% to 17%, meaning its taxes dropped by 45%. AT&T's taxes dropped by 81%, saving the company $8 billion. Why? The Trump tax cut helped its effective tax rate drop from 13% to 3%. When selling the program, Trump promised, quote, tremendous relief for the middle class. in tax benefits and rewards to employees from grateful companies. But in fact, fewer than 5% of companies actually offered bonuses or wage hikes. And the greatest beneficiaries of the TCJA by far were the wealthiest Americans. Most companies use their TCJA windfall for stock buybacks, totaling $1 trillion according to CNN. Several companies, including Verizon and AT&T, actually laid off employees. Promises that the tax cut would pay for itself never materialized. TCJA tax benefits to individuals are set to expire in 2025. Corporate tax rates will remain the same.
Steve Norris.
My name is Steve Norris. I live in Lakewood. And today I'm talking about tax increment financing extensions. Tax increment financing, or TIFs, can be a form of corporate rule when they benefit private corporations or individuals over public good. Cleveland has used 30-year TIFs to freeze tax rates at low levels prior to renovations. The avoided property taxes would normally go to construction costs or infrastructure. When the TIF eventually expires, the county and other tax entities like the Metro Parks and libraries benefit. East Fourth, the earliest TIF, was going to expire in 2033, but has been extended until 2063. Hard to believe. Other extended TIFs include the downtown Hilton and Westin hotels, Steelyard Commons, and the Louis Stokes Cleveland VA Medical Center. The Ohio legislature allowed cities to double the length of TIFs to allow future TIF funds to be used outside property boundaries. Money can go towards infrastructure and potentially to private developers. Mayor Bibb's team said it wouldn't initially, but said they could use it that way in the future. If development is already complete, why is diverting taxes appropriate? Schools are generally excluded, so Cleveland.com projected these non-school property tax losses. Cuyahoga County's Health and Human Services, $38 million. Cleveland Public Library, $32 million. Cuyahoga County Community College, $20 million. Cuyahoga County Board of Developmental Disabilities, $15 million. Cleveland Metro Parks, $12 million. County General Fund Debt Service, $6 million. These estimates don't include suburban TIFs like Orange Village's Pinecrest and potentially Beechwood's Eaton Corp. And Shaker Heights Van Aken District and others. The city would also issue debt through the Port of Cleveland for an estimated $3.3 and $7.5 billion shore-to-core-to-shore TIF district. Where are the funds going? Bedrock will develop Tower City Center and the east bank of the Cuyahoga. $400 million in infrastructure relates to $3 billion private spending. TIF funds will also go for a land bridge from downtown to the lakefront and development around Cleveland Browns Stadium. $706 million matches $1.3 billion in private investment. Dale Miller called out the city for severely impacting revenue, which is used for basic services for the neediest in our community. Beechwood City Councilman Mike Berkins said these taxes were voted on by residents. Just because the city might legally be able to hijack the money from its intended purpose and use it for something else doesn't mean we should. The health and human services needs of everyday Clevelanders are being shortchanged while many millions of tax dollars support projects of billionaires Dan Gilbert and Jimmy Haslam. To fight inequality and end big money in politics, including here in Cleveland and Cleveland Heights, we need HJR 54, the We the People Amendment. Thank you.
Why don't we go back to Greg Coleridge?
Well, as mentioned, it's been 11 years since Cleveland Heights voters passed Issue 32, calling for an amendment to the U.S. Constitution declaring, 1, only human beings, not corporations, are legal persons with constitutional rights. And 2, money is not equivalent to speech. And therefore, regulating political contributions and spending does not equate to limiting political speech. In many respects, little has changed. Political money spent in elections, much of it donated or invested by the super rich and corporate entities, continue to increase, with more of it being quote unquote dark money from sources and places that are unknown. The problem is not only federal, but increasingly at the state and even local levels, as Steve and others have chronicled. Legalized bribery has never been more legal and corrupting, with the voices of people who can't invest in politicians less heard and responded to. Additionally, cash spent on lobbying from special interest groups continues to rise. In both cases, the super rich and corporations have hijacked First Amendment free speech rights. Communities and states continue to be unable to mandate corporations to include information on food products or renewable energy, since it violates corporate First Amendment right not to speak. Communities continue to be unable, for the most part, to conduct surprise inspections on corporate property to protect workers, consumers, and the environment, since that violates corporate Fourth Amendment search and seizure rights. It goes on. Efforts to seriously call for keeping fossil fuels in the ground and not burned to prevent further climate destruction is deterred by the prospect of fossil fuel corporations will claim that unmined, drilled, or fracked fossil fuels are lost future profits and violate their Fifth Amendment's takings rights. And communities continue to be unable to provide preferential treatment of local businesses over chain stores, or to prevent, in many cases, cell phone towers from rising in their communities, since such actions are discriminatory, violating corporations' 14th Amendment equal protection rights. So, in many respects, little has changed. Yet at the same time, much has changed in the past 11 years. The explosion of money in politics and abuses and harms of corporations to people, places, and the planet are becoming ever more blatant, hideous, systemic, and unacceptable. Greater realization that simply electing better people, passing better laws, enacting better regulations, or declaring better executive decisions are not proportionate in scale to the magnitude of the breadth and depth of corporate rule and money in politics. Merely putting out fires while ignoring the arsonists are just reactive, responsive, and defensive. They will never, ever help us create a more just, peaceful, sustainable, and democratic community, county, nation, state, and beyond. Discussion about continual constitutional renewal is becoming more mainstream, as you may know, on many fronts. That includes ending the constitutional doctrines that a corporation is a person and money is free speech. The We the People Amendment, H.R. 54, has never had more support. 518,000 individuals have signed our motion to amend. 706 communities have passed resolutions or citizen-driven ballot initiatives, including 8 states have done the same. 770 organizations have endorsed, and 85 congresspersons have endorsed, including Shontel Brown. We're under no illusions. Amending the Constitution is not easy, the most difficult, in fact, of any on the planet. In fact, it's been done, though, 27 times before, often when several were enacted in a relatively short period of time when external conditions warranted them. Yet, we are under no illusions. External conditions warrant constitutional change. Our political crises, plural, have reduced the trust in government. Without trust, you can't have a legitimate and viable government. And our political economy right now is based on exploiting people and the planet by promoting perpetual economic growth on a finite planet without severe political, economic, or environmental consequences. Talk about fantasy. Changing the law is always preceded by changing the culture. Nothing else in the world is so powerful as an idea whose time has come, says Victor Hugo. I just conclude by saying the time is rapidly coming to have a just, peaceful, sustainable, and democratic community, nation, and beyond. The We the People Amendment is one part of what many of us believe will inevitably become constitutional renewal. Thanks.
Len Friedson.
I have to raise this just a little bit. Yeah. Hi, my name is Len Friedson, 3065 Berkshire Road. Amongst the constitutional amendments that are existing, and especially the first 10, the Fourth Amendment stands out as being not immune from pressures by corporate entities to make some changes. In 1906, a Supreme Court justice, when referring to the Fourth Amendment, which, by the way, I should mention, the Fourth Amendment, say again? Yes, is the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. In 1906, one of the justices voiced an opinion that said, in my opinion, a corporation, an artificial being, invisible, intangible, and existing only in contemplation of law, cannot claim the immunity given by the Fourth Amendment, for it is not part of the people within the meaning of the amendment, nor is it embraced by the word persons in the amendment. This Supreme Court justice was John Harlan, and earlier this month we celebrated, actually I didn't, but many did, his 191st birthday. Later that was in 1906. In 1967, another Supreme Court decision read as follows, read to the extent that the Supreme Court grants corporations Fourth Amendment protection from random inspection by fire departments. The court framed the issue on the basis of business enterprises, corporate or otherwise. An administrative warrant is necessary to enter and inspect commercial premises. Without random inspections, it became virtually impossible to enforce meaningful anti-pollution, health, and safety laws. So we can see that they're being attacked by the corporate community on constitutional issues, and they're receiving sympathetic views from various Supreme Courts, the current not excluded. Thank you.
Madeline Watts.
On June 13th, 1866, our states ratified the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, granting former slaves citizenship, due process, and equal protection of the law. After the amendment's adoption by Congress, Speaker of the House Schuyler Colfax spoke in favor of Section 1. I will tell you why I love it. It is because it is the Declaration of Independence placed immutably and forever in the Constitution. Corporations almost immediately hijacked the 14th Amendment to claim personhood rights in the 1886 Santa Clara versus Southern Pacific decision. As Justice Hugo Black stated, of all the cases in this court in which the 14th Amendment applied during the first 50 years after its adoption, less than 0.5% invited in its protection of the Negro race, and more than 50% asked for that benefit to be extended to corporations. On June 14th, 2010, there was a publication of a revised edition of Unequal Protection, How Corporations Became People, and How You Can Fight Back by Thomas Hartman. A seminal work, unequal taxes, unequal accountability for crime, unequal influence, unequal control of the media, unequal access to natural resources. Corporations have gained these privileges and more by exploiting their legal status as persons. How did something so illogical and unjust become the law of the land? Thank you.
That was all I had for who signed up. Anyone else?
Can I just read one more date?
Fine with me.
We tried to pick a few things that took place historically in June. And the 14th Amendment, by the way, that was today, the history you may have noticed when it passed. Just two other quick dates. On June 17th, in the year 1239, goes back a ways, was the birth of King Edward I. Why is that important? Because he was first to utilize, for those of you who have your degrees in Latin, something called quo warranto, a written order. Quo warranto is a medieval Latin meaning, quote, by what warrant, or by what authority. It's a written order by a governing power, kings in the past, legislatures early in US history, and courts in the present, requiring the person to whom it is directed to show what authority they have for exercising a claimed right or power. So it originated under King Edward I of England to recover previously lost lands, rights, and franchises. This power was transferred to states following the American Revolution. State legislatures utilized quo warranto powers to challenge previously chartered or franchised corporations that acted beyond their original privileges granted by the state. The result was frequent revocation of corporate charters and dissolution of corporations in the name of affirming citizen sovereignty, self-governance, or self-determination. All 50 states still retain elements of quo warranto. Look it up in the Ohio Revised Code. The authority concerning the creation and dissolution of corporations remain in existence, even though they are not being used very much. So, quo warranto. One more. On June 18th, 1849, was the birth of a former Attorney General here in Ohio named David K. Watson. What's his story? Well, Watson sought to revoke the charter of the Standard Oil Corporation in 1892 for forming a trust. Standard Oil of that day at that time was far and away the most powerful corporation in the country. In his legal brief to the Ohio Supreme Court, he stated, quote, where a corporation either directly or indirectly submits to the domination of an agency unknown to the statute or identifies itself with and unites in carrying out an agreement whose performance is injurious to the public, it therefore offends against the law of its creation and forfeits all right to its franchises, and judgment of ouster should be entered against it, unquote. By the way, Watson was a Republican Attorney General, the first of two Republican Attorney Generals who tried to go after Standard Oil. In both cases, the court chose not to revoke the charter. But after the second time, when a second Republican Attorney General went after Standard Oil, that's when they decided to move. And as you may know, they moved from Ohio to Pennsylvania, which at that time was like the charter mongering state where companies could basically write their own charter. And that was before Delaware maneuvered Pennsylvania, charter mongered Pennsylvania, to where now more than half of the Fortune 500 companies are chartered there. But anyway, that's the story of David K. Watson.
All right, council, who would like to have at it here?
I would just like to thank all of you for coming out for Democracy Day. Every year I learn something important and something I didn't know before. So I thank you so very much for the knowledge and for you all continuing to come to do Democracy Day. Thank you so much.
Councilman?
like Councilwoman Russell said, thank you very much for coming today. I think that I am someone who's pretty well read, but sometimes you can get in your little bubbles, and it's important to be reminded of how many important issues there are out there. And so again, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it.
Councilman, the other Jim?
Still trying to learn how to use the microphone. I'm the new guy here, so this is very new to me. And it makes me really proud to live in a community like this, where you guys can come here and educate us on stuff that maybe we may not know enough about. So really thank you for your time, coming out here to speak. It's a heavy lift for some people, and I really appreciate the time that you guys spent with us. It was really enjoyable.
Councilwoman Larson.
Thank you, President Kuda. I was looking forward to tonight, so I'm thankful I was able to be here instead of up there on the wall. It impresses me so much that we don't just sit back on our laurels, that the folks that are here in this room tonight and many, many more are active in fighting the fracking. And you and I met a long time ago when we were fighting the fracking brine that was going into that small little town. The people who are fighting First Energy, Carla, you and I have talked about my experiences with them. So I can only encourage people to remain vigilant, because we have to keep this democracy going. And I also want to encourage people to make sure they sign the petition for redistricting, to make sure that we have an independent, which will be a democratic, much more democratic than it is now, commission that writes the next set of maps for our voting districts. So once again, thanks for being here.
And I want to thank Carla for not quizzing us tonight. Usually we get a quiz. I end up feeling badly about myself when it gets graded. And I want to say thank you to Addie, who's here on the evening of her wedding anniversary. I'm sure she, so we really do appreciate you. I want to say a few things, some about what was said tonight and some of my own thoughts. In this room, just in the last 2.5 years, we've had hockey parents, angry hockey parents, people here to talk about the Gaza war and what we city council ought to do. TWG development agreement just a few weeks ago. This place was, I mean, they were right up to here, right up to the front. The Coventry Peace Campus, at the last meeting, there must have been 30 people that walked up and spoke. You might know the numbers. And then there's a lot of individuals that get up here and just say, hey, would you guys wake up? I've had the same problem on my street for 4 years. I've been calling, and I love that democracy happens in this room. Greg, you said 2 words that really struck. There were a lot of wonderful things said tonight. House Bill 6 or Senate Bill 6, I can't remember if it was the House or Senate bill. HB 6, yeah. Fracking, the 4th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, Judith singing, those beautiful songs. There was just a lot of great things. But Greg talked about legitimacy and authority and trust. The thing that gives legitimacy to our government is the trust, if we still have it, I hope so, and agreement on the principles. The legitimacy comes like from our Constitution on the agreement of the principles in it. We are working on a new charter right now. Well, not a new charter, but charter amendments that were suggested to us. And eventually those amendments, whatever they are going to come to you. And what will give it legitimacy, if it were moved forward, is agreement between city council, our government, but at the end of the day, it comes from you. I know that I understand why the Supreme Court jealously guards the First Amendment. I completely understand that. I think all of you feel the same way. And I know that part of saying money is speech is to guard that free speech, that First Amendment right. Pretty much all Supreme Court cases are balancing one right against another. And I guess that's where they came down. I just wonder sometimes, I guess I wonder all the time if allowing the Citizens United, allowing this money to be speech obliterates and does more harm to other speech where there is not enough money involved. And I wish the Supreme Court would take a harder look at that. And those, because you're always weighing stuff. And that's what I see. I see, in my lifetime, I've seen the more money that gets into politics and so forth, the less speech coming from people who don't have it. And then you get to the legitimacy issue. Do we really have democracy? And I don't want to see it disappear because of money. You guys all did a great job tonight. We really appreciate you coming here. Great things happened in this room, and tonight is just another example of that. And if there are no other business in front of this council, this meeting is adjourned.